A perfect storm of intense winds and low humidity turned into some of the largest wildfires in Los Angeles history. On today's show, we look into what happened in Southern California and how residents there are planning to rebuild their lives following the disaster. I'm Annalise Borges, and this is The Stream.
All right, dude. So, yeah, let's get out of here. We tried, bro. I'm sorry. We tried our best. Yeah, when this tree falls, it's over.
If you are in these areas and you get an evacuation order, you need to leave. You need to leave immediately. Don't know.
Not everyone is wealthy who lives in Los Angeles. I am so beyond disgusted by so many posts that I'm seeing online about how eat the rich, they deserve this, only celebrities live in Los Angeles.
And so I can't believe it. Everything is gone. My whole hometown is gone.
Who picks up the bill? The houses, schools, literally everything needs to be rebuilt. And some estimates say that's going to be billions of dollars.
This is some of what we already saw on our social media feeds. People fleeing their homes, others describing how they felt about losing everything. But to understand the scale of the devastation, we begin today's show with a look at the numbers. Since the California wildfires erupted on the 7th of January, more than 19,000 hectares burned. At least 28 people were killed, and more than 17,000 structures have been completely destroyed. It could cost California up to $275 billion to rebuild. But what is the human cost of the catastrophic blazes? Today, we'll also talk about what is driving these extreme wildfires. Is it climate change, drought, mismanagement? And what changes are needed in the future? Joining us to discuss are Summer Dean, a climate scientist based in Los Angeles, activist and content creator Rebecca Faith Quinn, Nola Haynes, an academic, policy writer, and advocate. She has many other hats, but we'll stick to these today. And Natalie Dempsey, who was born and raised in California and is a resident of LA. Thank you all so much for your time. Natalie, I would like to start with you because we came across this particular clip that you posted online, and I want to ask you about it.
And I ironically only have this Pacific Palisades sweatshirt. I've lost everything. And I know you internet trolls, I'm not some Nepo baby. I grew up on food stamps. I'm an esthetician. I followed my dreams and became a celebrity esthetician. And I just worked really hard to get there. Really hard.
Natalie, can you tell us briefly where you were at that point, and also what have you lost in these fires?
Hi, thank you for having me on. I just wanted to say that that was a really emotional moment for me. I was trying to get back inside the Palisades because at that time, my house and my business hadn't burned yet, according to the fire map. So I had pulled up on Sunset. And of course, I understand why I was rejected to go back in because it was still on fire. But it was a very emotional moment for me because I just wanted to save anything from my previous life, essentially.
And did you manage to save anything?
No. I lost my business, which was in the Palisades, not the village of Caruso, but the older village, in the shops of Via de la Paz. I had a spa, and I was a resident of the Palisades.
We spoke briefly before the show, and you described how you fought really hard to get to where you were. You actually addressed that in the video there, the misconception that those affected by the fire were rich and famous and could easily rebuild. Where do things stand for you right now? Where are you staying, for example? Did you get any help?
Well, no. I will be entering litigation with insurance companies that I'm not allowed to speak about because I don't have any. And I've yet to receive anything from FEMA, anything from SBA. People seem to forget that SBA is also loans based off a lot of earnings and stuff, so they're not even the same for everybody. I am staying with a friend in Santa Monica. I'm currently homeless, jobless, so applying for any type of place to rent is nearly impossible since you need to make 2.5 times the income of the rent, and I am unemployed. So there's a lot of multi-layered situation going on right now of how to go forward because I'm stuck in so many directions.
And again, we thank you immensely for joining us today during these difficult circumstances. We're going to ask you a little bit more about how you plan to go on. But first, I also wanted to ask Nola, your family has been affected by the fires. You guys lost 4 homes, if I'm not mistaken, altogether. There's been significant criticism toward what many perceived as authorities' just lack of preparedness. Can I get your take on this?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. This feels like deja vu because not only is my family struggling through the Eaton fires and the 4 homes we lost collectively in Altadena, but we also went through this during Hurricane Katrina. So my family has been devastated twice by extreme climate events. In terms of mismanagement, I saw an interview, I think with one of the fire chiefs, and they said something that resonated with me, that the city was, multiple cities, and people have to understand that Los Angeles is not Altadena, it's not Palisades, like all of these are different, municipalities and different cities. So in terms of the city, we'll just say, all the surrounding areas being prepared to fight these fires. They weren't prepared to fight multiple fires with 70 to 100 miles per hour wind. In terms of mismanagement, I know for a fact in Altadena that my aunt and uncle and the rest of my family were notified very late. They were not notified when some other residents in Altadena were notified. So that is a question that we have. Why were they notified so late to the point where they weren't able to take anything with them?
And there are so many questions, I imagine, among people affected. Some of them were actually, unfortunately, fueled by misinformation. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But often, authorities have been responding the fact that they could have been better prepared, but it was going to be very hard to tackle the magnitude of these fires. And Summer, as we're having this conversation, fires are still burning, I believe, in Southern California. And California has been known for fire season, which used to be May through October. How has climate change contributed to changes that have made these fires more frequent, more severe? And also, would you say that something like this was expected? Could authorities have planned and prepared better?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. And yes, exactly like you said earlier, this was kind of a perfect storm of many different human-driven activities. And when it comes to the climate crisis, yes, Los Angeles has always experienced wildfires. Our landscape is very used to experiencing wildfire. And a lot of the landscape, the plants, the native plants here are experienced with fire and are very fire resilient. But now we live in a time where the fire season in Southern California is year round. And that is due to a few different factors. The first is chaotic rainfall patterns. So we're not just experiencing drought in Southern California, we're experiencing what climate scientists call weather whiplash. And weather whiplash happens when one year we might have record rainfall and the next year we might have no rainfall. So last winter, actually, Los Angeles received record rainfall. We actually, experienced what people called a hurricane at that time. And this year we've had no rain when Los Angeles every winter usually receives about 5 inches of rain. Wow. So that weather whiplash causes the land to dry up very fast. And when the land dries up really fast, it becomes like a tinderbox. A lot of the vegetation becomes very dry very quickly. So it's not just drought, it's like these very intense changes in weather patterns that are causing this. And then the other thing that really caused these fires to spread really quickly was the wind. So Los Angeles experiences the Santa Ana winds every single year, which are these really strong, powerful winds. And this year they were extremely intense. They were around 100 miles per hour. And scientists are beginning to find that the Santa Ana winds might be affected by the climate crisis, because the climate crisis is destabilizing the global jet stream, which is this huge river pattern of weather that goes all around the globe. And when that becomes destabilized, wind patterns can also become destabilized.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the show, but I want to bring Rebecca in because something else spread really fast, online at least, misinformation. There were a number of examples of this, including, of course, the Hollywood sign up in flames. Turns out that was AI. As a Californian, Rebecca, how dangerous did you find some of the information shared online? The misinformation, I mean, of course. And what would you like maybe to clarify to our viewers right now around the world?
Well, I would like to say that misinformation can really cost lives. There's been misinformation being spread around that Karen Bass defunded the fire department. We know that is not true. The fire department's budget was increased over the past year by over $17 million. And a lot of people seem to be also taking that as Karen Bass is in charge of all of LA County, when Karen Bass is only mayor of LA proper. Altadena and all of these other areas have different governments and different people in charge. Karen Bass can't just give money to whatever city she's not in charge of. There is something to be said about whether or not those funds were divested correctly or put out correctly to the departments that were needed, but they were not defunded. And that's something that a lot of people just took and ran with. A lot of people spread misinformation that everyone in LA can afford to rebuild, as one of the members of the panel was talking about earlier here. Most people in Los Angeles are living either close to or below the poverty line. Most of us in Los Angeles are just regular, everyday people who are trying to survive. And it's sad to see that the misinformation has gone to the point where people are lacking empathy for the everyday human being. It causes harm, and it causes us to overlook the systems that are in place that are contributing to this. When you focus on on some false narrative that the fire department was underfunded, then we don't get to look at things like climate change. We don't get to look at, what was the actual causes of the response times. We don't ask, why didn't members of Altadena get notified in time? Because we're too busy focusing on the wrong information.
And it's been fascinating to see just how much of the conversation became political as well, as you were saying. But something else that is going to affect residents, real people, and a point that many of you are well too familiar, insurance companies letting Californians down. Let me play out this clip from social media, and then we'll get you guys to react.
You see, since 1988, California lawmakers have tried to forcibly create affordable home insurance by imposing price controls on insurance companies. Obviously, the companies have never really liked this, but after the 2017 and 2018 mega fires, they just started saying and leaving the state entirely. The ones that have stuck around, like State Farm and Allstate, now refuse to write new policies for people in California. And thousands of homeowners have had their policies cancelled in the months before the fires even started. Actor Rob Schneider took to X today to vent his anger, saying, "F you, State Farm. Screw you and all your phony commercials. You are a pile of for canceling insurance policies of Californians. I will never use State Farm insurance ever again." So what happens if you struggle to get private insurance for your home? Well, nearly 500,000 Californians are now relying on the FAIR plan, the state's insurance of last resort. But here's the catch. FAIR isn't built for the kind of disaster happening right now. One expert estimates that just the Pacific Palisades alone could see $30 billion in losses. And you want to know how much in reserves the FAIR plan has? $385 million. Not even half of $1 billion.
These numbers are quite interesting, to say the least. Natalie, I believe you cannot talk much about where things stand with you. You said you were not insured, but you're involved in a lawsuit. I don't want to get you in trouble if you cannot. So probably better for me to put this question to Nola. I want to ask you what you're hearing about how folks are planning to go on, and what are their next steps when we see so many residents talking about just insurance companies letting them down.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Again, the echoes of Hurricane Katrina are so stark. But in terms of insurance, thankfully, my aunt and uncle in one of the 4 homes, they still have insurance, but they were a month away from being kicked off their insurance, 1 month. And so there are many people in the Altadena community that are facing a situation where they're just finding out that they were kicked off their insurance. And I want to make something very clear that just because you have insurance, it doesn't necessarily mean you have fire insurance. And also, like in Katrina, many people had insurance, but they didn't necessarily have flood insurance. So people are just really digging through their own lives and finding out exactly what they were insured for. And because of all of the chaos that's going on with FEMA, and it will be more chaos as unfortunately, disasters are politicized. And unfortunately, we have a government right now that's not that interested in helping people because the aid on California is conditioned. They want to put conditions on it. We don't know what's going to happen. And that is my sincerest fear. The chaos, the destabilization, home displacement, all of these numbers are going to skyrocket. Unemployment. I don't know why California, well, I do know why California is such a target. It is thought to be this liberal bastion, and that stronghold wants to be destroyed. But I want to say this, and I want to say it very plainly. We are talking about everyday people. My aunt and uncle worked very hard for their property, for their land. My uncle lived in that house for 50 years. We are talking about, generational home ownership. Most of the people that died in the Altadena fire were elderly because they worked their entire lives just to own land, just to own a piece of property. And I think it's unfortunate that the state is being held hostage for some political goal. And that is the part, if I'm being very honest with you, that upsets me more than anything, because this is not the time. This is the time for the country to actually come together and to help each other as much as possible. I'll stand down for my soapbox. I apologize.
No, it's I guess it reflects the opinion of many people. I don't know if of all people of California, but I wanted to get your take, Natalie, without sharing too much about your insurance situation, just as much as you can. How did it make you feel to see so many people talking about the fact that in California, they're all rich and famous, and so they can afford to rebuild from this?
Obviously sad enough to post a video about it. It made me really upset, the ignorance to people in California, that somehow an entire state as large as we are, just every single person here is affluent or living this very lavish, beautiful life that, some do, some are lucky enough to have that, and, bless them for it. But not everybody is in that category, unfortunately. And someone like myself, I'm basically living off of hopes and prayers right now. What little savings I have left, unfortunately. And I do believe that this has been way too politicized. I do not like the government's response to this. Don't like it. Don't like at all how this has been politicized.
And I think one of the very interesting elements, obviously, in any crisis is the fact that people can indeed question authorities. the time of the response, how they respond. But obviously, the political infighting is quite delicate because we are talking about people's lives. And one of the points picked up online was a specific program by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, where inmates help fight the fires. Some online users were quite shocked by the fact that they were working in dangerous conditions and being paid about $1 an hour. We spoke to a former inmate, Royal Rami, who has a different take on the program. Take a look.
So first off, it's a voluntary program, and no one has to do it. Second, it's an opportunity that folks can learn a skill that could potentially turn into a career that they allow them to make, 60 to 100K a year with benefits, retirement, and much more, right? When you at fire camp, the benefits are pretty much you get better food. You can meet with your family in a park-like setting instead of behind the glass. You're out there in the community, helping out instead of you being in a cell pretty much all day. And so for me, it was life-changing, like you said earlier. And it's about how we could put that training into work once, men and women come home. And we need to provide a pathway to get folks a career that doesn't just help them, but it helps out our community. And because, fire prevention is a key and we need more of it.
Rebecca, your take on this and on the conversation around it online, but also on how this crisis will further exacerbate other crises in and around Los Angeles.
Yes, Los Angeles is still recovering from the mass disabling event that was COVID-19, as our entire country is, honestly, as the world is. And with the burning of so many homes that were built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, there's a lot of asbestos in the air. As we know, asbestos is a known carcinogen, and added on top of that, the new immunocompromisation of many people to COVID-19, what we're going to see is a doubling down almost on a mass disabling event, which is really tragic because the people who are the most affected are those who are already immunocompromised. The people who have been left behind the most throughout this entire conversation have been disabled people. Most of the people who were killed in the fires were not just elderly, but they were also disabled people who physically could not leave their homes. And with people becoming newly disabled and newly compromised after COVID-19, and now the effects of all of the asbestos and other toxins in the air, people are unfortunately going to see exactly how little our infrastructure supports disabled people. When it comes time for emergencies like this, it really is no plan to evacuate the disabled community.
Wow. And of course, looming above all these compounding crises is still climate change. Summer, going forward, what should we expect? Is there a way to prepare for what is going to hit us?
Well, like we've been talking about, the climate crisis is a threat multiplier. And every single systemic injustice that we've been talking about, like the disabled community, like people who have been impacted from COVID-19, the climate crisis is just going to make all of this worse. And every single person, that has been affected by these systemic injustices, climate change is just going to make that worse. And in the future, we need to be better prepared for chaotic weather patterns and more intense wildfires. And really, we just need a government that believes in science at the very core. Right now, we have a presidential administration that does not believe in science, that is making misguided decisions based on corporate greed. We have a president that is giving conditional support to California only if we start diverting water from Northern California, which will, also affect endangered fish populations in Northern California. So all of these things are very interconnected, and we really need leadership that is grounded in science and truth and facts first and foremost. And going into the future, if we want to have a resilient community, a resilient city, a resilient state and country, we need to protect the most vulnerable communities first, and we need to be prepared for chaotic weather patterns.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to hear more from Natalie as well about her next steps, from Nola about her family's concerns, but we will check with you guys again in a few weeks' time to see how you were doing, or in a few months' time. I promise that. Thank you so much for your time, Summer, Rebecca, Nola, and Natalie. Thank you for being part of the stream today. And thank you all for tuning in. Keep in touch with us online. You can use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we will look into your questions and suggestions. Take care, and I'll see you soon.